Hello, my name is koda.kailin, and I'm an aspiring writer. I got really into writing when I was in writer's craft in grade 12, where it kind of taught me about how to write short stories and poetry and stuff like that. I definitely recommend if it's kind of an interest of yours, writing already, because before that I was writing fan fictions, and unfortunately role playing on Amino and stuff in the role playing community. Now I want to try to finish a manuscript, please. That'd be awesome. And maybe get that published one day. That'd be cool. But yeah, I just wanted to make this YouTube channel to share writing advice and yap about my own story and meet other people in the community maybe. Yeah. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to write a good character backstory, because that's kind of where you start when you start writing. You make your main character. Sometimes has other stories attached to it, but there's usually one central idea and one central story of your character, and a great backstory should be a nice reference point for you to go back to while writing and remember what their character's like. But I hope I'm not talking too fast. Character creation starts with your character's backstory. It's the original story of your character, and it should honestly serve as an explanation for their actions in the story, no matter how cliche or no matter how cliche or overdone the backstory can be, both parents dying in a car accident or something like that. It can still be a unique backstory depending on how your character reacts to it. A backstory is a writer's beacon of reference for who that character is, so it's important to make it as strong as possible. How do you write a strong backstory? In my very convoluted experience, the starting character's personality informs their backstory, and their backstory informs their started personality, a weird Ouroboros thing. And I say starting personality because your character's gonna have development during the story, and I find it easier to write the backstory and the personality in tandem together at the same time. And usually I'll start with actually a flaw. Okay, example. Imagine your character's first personality trait is that they're a nervous character. They're nervous, anxious. You may have at least I do, have the instant urge to offset the negative trait with a positive trait and continue fleshing out their personality. They're nervous, but they're really protective of their friends, you know? You want to give a balance to their character to kind of justify them. So just hold on from fleshing out their personality right now, because that flesh should be torn from their backstory. First ask yourself, why are they nervous? Imagine they fought with their sibling, and their parents didn't validate their emotions or comfort them. That led to them being a very nervous person. And even from just that one imagination, there could be a lot of other personality traits stemming from it. For example, they might be emotionally recluse because they're not used to getting comfort anyways. They might have a short temper because the fighting. They might grow up to be very quite avoidant. The original story should have a lot to say about who their character is and where their character development could go. But now you should ask yourself, how did they try to manage it? They are in this tough situation, they're so freaking nervous, and what did they do to survive? That's kind of where you can make your story unique and your character unique. If they manage it in an interesting way, then you have an interesting character. Imagine they fight again with no emotional reprieve, and they're nervous because no one was ever there when they fell. They learn the patterns of when a fight is about to happen, and they try to avoid it before it comes. The nervous character learned to be, calculating and maybe observant, but they're a child. They weren't going to therapy for the situation. They learned to distance themselves when someone got too close before they could hurt them. TLDR. You start with a character flaw that stems from an old situation in their backstory. And in order to survive that situation, this is the person they had to become. Since their backstory, the character has probably matured and developed, and not been so in fight or flight, if they have a quite traumatic backstory. But their key flaws should have still persisted from that trauma in their backstory. And the backstory is like, going to be like the explanation for like those flaws, not a justification, because you know a good flaw shouldn't be able to be justified like so easily, but definitely as like an explanation for kind of like why they ended up this way. If you feel like your character's voice and personality is slipping away like while you're writing, you should go back to your backstory and read it over and remind yourself of like where they came from, their roots. Because if you continue to lose the depth and consistency of their character, you should consider fleshing out their backstory as a way of fleshing out their current character. Maybe their backstory is like not strong enough and it's not really supporting their current character, and that's why they keep slipping away from you. The easiest way to expand their backstory is to just keep asking why. Why did they react that way? Why didn't they react that like at all? Like, why were they having a fawn response? What did they do? Where did they go? Did they change themselves? Why did they change themselves? And why didn't they ever get better after the backstory? I feel like even the most like cliche and overused backstories can still create the most unique and interesting characters if they're reacting in an interesting and unique way. Trauma like affects everybody differently. Even if two characters are siblings in the same situation, they'll still turn out varied. But if you are writing like a traumatized character, it's really important to do your research and make sure you're accurately like depicting kind of what those situations would lead to, and like put yourself in like in their shoes and try to empathize like what like a realistic reaction would be. I also want to say that trauma doesn't make a good or great backstory. The stakes that like traumatic situations and the backstory provide can be like really interesting and like have like a lot of like momentum, but writing trauma like you're unfamiliar with like without research will seem like even more cliche and even like sometimes like ignorant, and like I guess just like kind of like bad writing. You have to ask yourself like why specifically that trauma that you're trying to write, and is your character reacting with like real nuance and like consequences to that trauma. I'm a firm believer that a normal and mundane backstory is really, really amazing in its own way. It'll make your character even more grounded and like realistic and even like relatable to many people with like stable homes who still have problems and their own flaws and conflicts in their life. It'll also be like a little bit like more detrimental almost, like when the character undergoes like a conflict and trauma during the story, because it's like something that wasn't ever like in their reality growing up. Basically what I'm trying to say is like trauma is good and no, that's not what I'm trying to say. That is not what I'm trying to say. Basically what I'm trying to say is like after you give your character like their first flaw and you want to start coming up with a situation for their backstory, you can have it like as mundane or as like traumatic as you want it to be, and it'll still give them like good character flaws to like go off of. And then after like you decide like on like what like you want their situation, their backstory to be, you have to figure out how they survive that situation, what kind of personality traits they develop to like survive, and those personality traits should carry your character to who they are at the start of their story. Good luck with your backstories and character creation. If you want like more clarity on anything I talked about, or if I skimmed through anything, feel free to like leave any questions in the comments. Yeah, this was a trip to writing character backstories. Thank you so much.